Hey, it's Bill Simmons from The Ringer, and this is a podcast called The Rewatchables. We have been doing it really since 2017. It started with how much we love the movie Heat. We decided to structure a whole podcast with categories: most rewatchable scene, who won the movie, Apex Mountain, what age the best. But here's the thing. If you want the full archive, you can hear them only on Spotify, for free, by the way. So make sure to follow The Rewatchables on Spotify. This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day, or hiking, or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and startup investor Chris Dixon. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what it's like to be part of a community of fans. You value the people who play, perform, and create for everyone. Well, what if there are more ways to support them, more ways to be a fan? And what if you had even more ways to connect with the teams, artists, and other creators that you love? Even though creators make the internet valuable, how much value do they get for their work? Well, that's mostly up to a few big tech companies. Shouldn't creators get more from the platforms they make successful? More value, but also more say, more control, more ownership? Read, Write, Own explores an alternative future for the internet, one that reclaims control for creators, fans, listeners, and gamers, the people who not only use the internet, but make it useful. Read, Write, Own imagines an internet built by us for us. So order your copy of the book today or learn more at readwriteown.com.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, the hat is back. It's Andy Greenwald!
I feel like you've waited a long time to be able to talk about Justified.
I have. Somehow, so Justified was like sort of at its artistic maybe peak in 2011, which predates the Hollywood Prospectus podcast.
Not many things predate our podcast.
I know.
I think that's fair to say. But that one did.
Yeah. And so we never really, and then I think you were probably, was Justified one of those shows where you're like, I'm 3 seasons behind?
Yeah. So in my defense, and this is broadly indefensible.
And we were going to be talking about Justified City Primeval.
And just the reboot. What's it called?
I think
Reimagining,
it's a Justified story.
We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the Justified itself. I think we're not going to be very spoiler heavy, although we will talk about the first 2 episodes of City Primeval that came out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in my defense, and I do think it's indefensible, I kind of adopted a kind of pissy policy that I was like, I can't go backwards. Because once I started being the full-time TV critic for Grantland in the fall of like September 2011, there was so much, it felt like, in retrospect now, there was relatively little content, but it felt like so much. And back then I was watching all the network broadcast pilots and recapping 4 distinct sitcoms every Thursday night.
I remember that. That was cool.
That was a great lift. Just no spotters, just deadlifts. So I did adopt this policy that was very self-protective and a little silly, that I wouldn't go backwards on shows that were well into their run, like Sons of Anarchy and Justified, particularly FX shows.
Thank you. I hope John Landgraf appreciated that.
I know Nick's listening, and I'm sorry.
True Blood, for instance, you probably didn't go back.
That's right. Know? Yeah. So, but I was wrong about that with Justified, because I think Elmore Leonard's probably the greatest American writer, maybe. That's full stop.
Yeah.
And every episode of that show that I've watched, I've really enjoyed.
This is actually a good segue to how I wanted to talk to you about Justified. I didn't know, did you have any opening remarks you wanted to make before we really get into Justified?
Yes. I had a couple things, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Most people save
Senator.
this stuff for the end, but I think it's the dog days of summer. So whatever you want to.
Don't you think that's weird though? If like you spend 40 minutes just like passionately debating the ethics of being a passenger on a hijacked plane and then being like, so in other news, I feel like the beginning is the time for potpourri. Is that not right?
It's not how most people do it on their pods.
So give me an example.
I think Sean runs a tight ship, gets right into business.
Sean scripts his openings, I believe. He's like,
he scripts them the way I script them.
He's like Andy Reid, right? Like the
yes,
first
he knows
10
the
plays.
first 10 plays. Yeah.
And then after that, it's just time
just
management.
Donovan McNabb
chaos.
throwing the ball into guys' ankles. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I perhaps there's a small strike update, which is just to say,
you're still on strike.
Still on strike. I gotta say, like, it's not.
Is this a strike beard we're seeing here?
This was oversleeping stubble.
Okay.
This is not relax. Okay, this is not a beard.
I wanted to know if I'm watching the beginning of something.
You always are watching the beginning of something unless it's the end of something. It is not a good thing broadly for two major industries to be on strike, and there's a lot of hardship involved, but it has felt great to have the actors out there.
Mm-hmm.
Legitimately, it has completely changed the energy of the picket lines and the attention paid. A lot more Getty photographers, I would say, stopping dudes, and then very robustly, like, not asking me my name or how to spell it. So, which is fine.
Yeah.
They're like NATHANFIE. It's great. I love it. But it was wonderful. I had a Briar Patch reunion yesterday at Paramount.
I saw that on Instagram,
Just
man.
Wonderful.
It seemed beautiful.
It was really meaningful. I love those people, and it was great to be together. And thank you to Carol Lombardini and the AMPTP for fucking up so majorly that I got to see my pals again in the middle of the day.
It is wild that there are no strike updates other than here's the pictures of people striking. Like, there is no, like, we're going to meet August 10th at this hotel suite. Like, this person's going to be the rep. I think it was like Richard Rushfield had like a kind of, here's some ideas, just throwing them against the wall.
Oh, that's cool. No bad ideas.
Well, he was like, should Peter Chernin, who helped end the last strike, come back and, like, be kind of a godfather to this thing, or should here are like all these ideas like to wrap this up, and it just seems like there's very little thawing going on despite the heat out on the streets.
It's real hot. Yeah, I mean it's clear now there was no serious conversation when the negotiations were happening.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an issue of we say 15, they say 5, and we meet at 10. That's not what this is. If you look over, and now the actors have released what their demands were versus what the responses were, there are certain areas which the AMPTP's policy was, we will not discuss this.
Mm-hmm.
We will not budge on this. We will not consider your requests at all. So it is an unserious conversation, and thus there is no conversation. I also think it's just worth noting the degree to which the
when you
actors
talk,
strike,
I almost sometimes I do feel compelled to be like, what, like from the studio's perspective.
I love that. Well, you're kind of a both sides guy. You know what I mean? I mean, it's fine.
Well, I really love development.
The development is great.
Yeah,
I'm not mad at the development executives.
Yeah. I love business affairs.
That's an odd passion of yours.
BA.
You know what you always turn the conversation to? Whenever we're out, like just having a drink, you always want to get into the minutia of deal points.
Yeah,
that's just where you're at.
Yeah.
No, so I don't know. I just think that they really fucked up.
Okay.
Like I think that an actor's strike is just catastrophic for the industry, and particularly for the studios, and the power of their celebrity denying it to the projects that are in development.
I'm starting to feel the
ripple
ripple effects of that. Not like on a personal level, obviously, like, but because who could possibly give a shit? But like, I think I'm starting to see it on Vulture in like the lack of juice that certain premieres have because people either had to cram in every single. Like, I think Barbie and Oppenheimer are going to be the last significant pop cultural moments until this ends.
So, do you think it's noteworthy, or does it feel different that? And tell me if I'm wrong, even in the proposition. But like, do you think that it is different that the public response to this seems to be largely pro-worker and like supportive of the actors and the writers in the strike? That's the vibe I get, and I wonder. I listen to a lot of sports podcasts, some of which are made by the Ringer Podcast Network, and I've heard Bill say a couple times about how just one of the main shifts in his life as a sports fan was that when he was growing up and Sports Illustrated would be like, here's the players' salaries. And it was a largely like anti-player feeling because who are these guys making this money?
Yes.
To now, when Dame Lillard is like, I want out, everyone's like, he should be treated well and go where he wants. Do you sense that in this?
I think I can't tell because I feel like the bubble is so real. Like I have literally no idea. My mom, for instance, who's a relatively engaged television and movie watcher.
Sure is. More than me.
I don't really think that she's like getting a lot of strike updates. Now, what updates is she getting? We'll leave that for another podcast. But like, I can't tell how much sort of random Joe public is up on this strike, is checking Instagram and seeing like their favorite stars holding up picket signs. And I don't really know if honestly, like 2 stars from a TV show or a movie try funny snacks video is like the absence of those things is going to bother most people. But I do think that there are a couple of things coming up. So for instance, I'll use this as an example. One of the movies I'm most excited about for the rest of the year is this movie called Challengers, which is Zendaya playing a tennis coach of Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist, who are professional men's tennis players.
And she used to be a player,
and there's like a love triangle. Yeah.
This is Luca Guadagnino?
Yes. It's honestly like everything that if you listen to The Watch and The Big Picture or The Rewatchables, the kinds of movies that like we pine for, that we feel like we grew up with, that are like adult dramedy with some sex and some laughs and some sports. What could be better?
I love tennis.
And
have you seen this movie or you're just talking about it?
I've not seen this movie. It's supposed to premiere in Venice. It may not, because Venice is largely a star-driven affair. It's like Cannes. It's like supposed to be a lot of red carpet photos. And if Zendaya is not promoting this movie, a sort of no IP, kind of romantic, kind of sporty, but blah, blah, blah. Like tennis is not like, it's not about like the quarterback for the Niners dating somebody. It's like
which quarterback?
Exactly, brother. Which Brock Purdy has a lot of time on his hands.
Can he use his hands?
Sorry,
I mean,
that was a real Philadelphia laugh.
That was just savage. I like it.
I recently rewatched highlights from the Eagles-Niners game.
Did you really?
Yeah, and all the Niners guys are like, yo, Brock can't throw. He can't move his arm.
It's like a snuff film. Really...
where was it? Oh, if Zendaya can't promote this movie, like, I'm sure that went into a lot of the arithmetic behind like, yeah, we'll make it for this number. And if Zendaya does a lot of like Instagram posts about it, people are going to go see it.
Yeah, she is, I think, one of the relatively few stars who could potentially move that needle.
Yes. So imagine No Hard Feelings if Jennifer Lawrence did not go on Hot Ones and Rewatchables and all and do the lap around.
That's the only 2 press things I believe she did for that movie.
No, she did a lot of podcasts though.
Yeah.
Like because I think that by that point the WGA strike had happened, and so she did a lot
talk
of
shows, right?
She did a lot of like internet shows. But now at this point with SAG on strike, you're not going to get any participation in promotion from the people who are primarily charged with selling these movies. Oppenheimer is not an easy sell. What is an easy sell is Matt Damon and Robert Downey Jr. being as charming as possible, while Cillian Murphy like stares like solar flares into the camera lens. But Robert Downey Jr. and Matt Damon are selling the shit out of Oppenheimer. Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie sold the shit out of Barbie. Those movies are going to be successful. Yeah, because of their major movie events, but also because the stars worked really hard to sell them. That's part of the job. If they can't do that, I wonder if Challengers moves. I wonder if Challengers
just say,
yeah, no. We'll put it out in spring of 24.
Yeah, because they know the best chance of it succeeding rests on the promotion.
Yes.
I agree. I think as with everything, people tend to respond to larger scale issues when it affects them and their interests personally. And so what we're seeing, for people out here and for people who are on the picket lines and directly affected, it's an immediate jarring change with concentric circles of effects on their lives and people that they know and care about. For the broader populace, I think, it's a bummer that the late night shows are gone. They're gone.
Yeah.
And perhaps distressingly, people might get used to them being gone, and that might cause their ratings to sink even further. Who knows? In 2 months, Saturday Night Live's not coming back. The fall schedule is just Yellowstone reruns, right? And the British version of Ghosts. There is no fall television season. So people will notice that. To your point, like movies won't necessarily be noticed or felt like movies.
will not be back in the fall. Yeah, right.
That's when it's going to start to get a little more pressing. And, if the studios wanted to, they could get in front of it. I mean, the Netflix today announced just a really robust spike in membership thanks to kicking people off of their parents' accounts, which was a pretty smart move. Yeah. But they also are claiming they have
over the studio.
We're not naming names. We're not naming names, but I feel Kaya, was there a moment when you weren't sure if it was cake or not? Like you couldn't actually find out for yourself?
Yeah, that's why I had to sign up for my own account.
We're thrilled for you.
Thank you.
What's your chosen image? Did you give an avatar?
Oh, I think I did the grandpa from second season of White Lotus.
Oh, wow.
As your Netflix avatar or as your Max avatar?
As my wait. Thank you. Oh, I did an otter as my Netflix avatar.
Oh, that's good.
I did. I only have an avatar for my Peacock account.
Oh, what's that?
Mariska Haggerty.
Oh yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. That's also on our docket. I've told the story that my children went into the Netflix account and changed my name to Daddy. So I still get emails that say, "Daddy, Cave of Bones is available for you." And I'm like, that is a sentence that should never be said out loud. They also they made an avatar for me that I think is like a cool dog from BoJack, which I think is nice.
Yeah. Oh, can I tell you something? Yesterday, I got like 7 emails from the company that makes Among Us, the phone game.
No.
You don't know that one?
No. Is that a game you play?
No, I don't play it. And the
you
email...
were quick about that.
All right. Emails. So it's a game that's very popular with kids. You're a ghost on a spaceship.
Hold on now. Kaya, is this popular?
I haven't heard of this, but I'm also not a gamer. And I don't think I'm like a kid.
It's an iPhone game that I think lots of kids play.
Do they have mice in their pocket?
No, it's...
Because I feel like this is the new part of the podcast where you just tell me things.
This is the thing.
Okay.
Is that the emails were like, a minor is trying to sign in on your Among Us account.
Oh, like a child? First I thought you meant like a coal miner.
Your child is trying... It just kept saying like, your child is trying to sign in. Your child is trying to sign in. I don't know why I brought that up, but go ahead.
Did you ever find out what was going on?
I just put it in spam. I don't have an Among Us.
Have you been hacked?
I've played once, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You still, just to update our listeners, you have not yet adopted a teenage ward.
No, I haven't. But if the strike goes on longer...
You're shopping. You're open to it. Anyway, just to say that Netflix has reported they have like $1 billion liquid, basically. Because they're not making as much stuff and they have a lot of money. And so good, keep announcing that, considering, it would be a tiny fraction to actually make a reasonable deal. But here we are.
Do you think that TV, let's say moving away from the current strike, it's Thursday as we're recording this. You and I have seen Oppenheimer. We'll be sharing some feelings about that next week.
I can't wait to talk about this. Because not only did we see Oppenheimer, we saw it in IMAX.
Yeah.
And then we went to Margaritaville.
Yeah.
It was really an epic Monday for Americans like us. Okay, go on.
Do you like the Barbie versus Oppenheimer discourse and the binary choice and the idea of everybody should go see a double feature of this, or like the eventization of 2 movies that really don't have anything to do with each other except for the fact that they're coming out on the same day?
Yeah. I mean,
it seems like it's been super healthy too.
I feel pretty good that I pretty much avoid discourse these days, except, I don't know if this happens to you, but I wake up, we should discuss this. Like, what's the first thing on your phone in the morning when you wake up? And I feel like you could feel free to hold the floor after this. I feel like
you get urgent fundraising texts from Kamala Harris every morning.
My mornings now are actually, it's like 5:55 a.m. I get a text from The Atlantic being like, everything you know about frogs is wrong. I'm like, you know what? I disagree, but I click because how do they know what I think about frogs? Anyway, the frogs are Ron DeSantis, by the way, in this analogy. Anything that makes people enthusiastic about movies, I broadly think is a good thing. It appears that maybe, judging from the way you asked the question, things have curdled slightly. But my sense was,
I think the movies need to come out now.
But I thought it was generally inclusive. Like, these movies that have nothing to do to each other are both going to be of note and interesting. And so why not celebrate them both? I mean, we won't say anything about Oppenheimer beyond this, but it was thrilling to see a movie that I just think is so worthy of engagement.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but I also just thought that alone felt really exciting.
I was trying to remember if there was ever a moment on TV where we had something versus something like this.
Well, I'm sure there are many. I mean, as soon as
whether it was the same night and you have to choose, are you going to watch this or this, or, Well,
one of the biggest ones from our childhood was in the late 80s, The Simpsons premiered and it was a huge sensation. and Fox aggressively, because Fox basically was a troll network at the time. They've since really sobered up since then. But Simpsons aggressive, and everyone, it's very hard for people to imagine this now, I bet, but there was a lot of like societal hand wringing, like, is Bart a good role model? Should this family be on television? And so Fox, leaning into this, yanked The Simpsons early on, like in season 1 or 2, and put it up against The Cosby Show, which was waning. And that was like America's Family. And again, I'm not sure what happened to that guy after that show.
Right.
But that was like a big who you got,
Right. I don't remember that at all.
It was a thing, like, which
I was probably playing sports.
You just smoking heaters behind the batting cage at age 12. We had different childhoods. It's cool. We could be friends now. But there used to be, when broadcast, like watching things live, was a bigger deal.
Yes.
You would go at things. Like there are.
I remember there were a couple of Sundays during the beginning of our podcasting relationship. There were certain times where it would be like you had to choose between Mad Men and Thrones, or Breaking Bad and Thrones. You had to tape one.
Oh, sure.
And you would watch Thrones, then watch Mad Men, because you wouldn't want anything to spoil Mad Men, and then you would watch like Veep or whatever was on after Thrones. And it was very elaborate because it was either DVR'd or I remember even like there would be like, well, my DVR can only record 2 things at once. So
I think a lot of for me, and I did find this interesting. Again, I was not playing sports at the time, so maybe that's why. But like the mindset of the broadcast networks and the schedulers, and like they would try to establish beachheads on certain nights, and then like ABC owned Fridays and NBC owned Thursdays and CBS owned everything else, and so like, but then they would sometimes be aggressive, almost like they were playing like war games. Like we sense softness in the Tuesday schedule, so we're going to go after it.
That's when HBO sent them dragons after Lord of the Rings. Remember?
Oh right. When they moved up, that's the great example.
Is House of the Dragon putting the date right up against the Lord of the Rings show to just be like, we still run Bartertown over here.
The tenor that's changed, or that's different, is the underlying thing with movies is that we are all a little bit Tom Cruise now, being like, let's save this beautiful American tradition.
It's so funny.
We didn't even talk about the video, because the beginning of Top Gun, when Tom, looking amazing, was like, thank you all for coming out, in this difficult time. And I was like, yes, we are the heroes here, Maverick. And then before Mission Impossible, they were like, let's do that again. But it seems like they came up with the idea to do it again, like
during a junket.
Or like right after Tom was like retrieved from the Norway mountaintop where he'd been jumping off on a motorcycle.
His hair was a little bit like that, going back.
His voice was real rough.
Yeah.
He did not seem great at that moment. But anyway, this idea that like movies, we need to celebrate this, and there's no teams here. We just need to get out there and support our friends at AMC and Regal and Nicole Kidman.
Should we get into Justified?
What do you think? Okay, last thing. Definitely not last thing. What do you think Nicole Kidman's payday was for the Heartbreak Feels Good in a Place Like This ad? And do you think she gets a piece of every time it airs?
Well, it's AMC, right?
Yes.
Is AMC still a meme stock? Do you think she's getting paid in like AMC stock?
No, she's too savvy a businesswoman for that.
Do you think she gets like a residual for every single time Heartbreak Feels Good in a Place Like This drops?
No, definitely not.
No.
Because they show a lot of movies during the day. So no. Do you think...
It's a flat rate.
Chris, purely isolate the tabs on your spreadsheet. Income, movie theater, promotional related income for Nicole Kidman and Maria Menounos. Who makes more for fiscal 23?
I think Kidman.
You think Kidman got more for that, just pretending to watch Creed once? Because Menounos is the hardest working woman in showbiz.
Yeah, but like Nicole Kidman has been the like avatar of the return to theaters.
Okay.
And that whole thing became
she was married to the avatar of the return to theaters. Oh, but you mean that whole...
Yeah, like everybody's cheering when she says that. Have you been in a theater where that's happened?
No, but I read someone saying that at a recent screening of something, a man stood up and recited it with her to applause. Okay.
That man was not you.
I can't confirm or deny that because my strike-related activities have to be separate.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Last thing, I do want to, before we get into Justified and Elmore Leonard broadly, I do want to do an SVU check-in because I find your commitment to the long-running NBC show Law and Order SVU to be adorable.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to know how it's going.
Boy, we watched a banger last night.
So is this still every night?
No, I think it's like what usually happens is we throw one on and fall asleep 20 minutes in.
I don't want to like lead the witness here.
I know. It's like, what do you want to know?
I want to know if we could talk about something that you told me that I have not stopped thinking about.
Okay.
Which is that you said that you often fall asleep.
Yes.
Which
right. Would. And then Phoebe texts me in the middle of the night to be like, it was the guy who was folding the shirts.
I think that is the sweetest thing I've ever heard in my life.
So that when I wake up, I know what happened at the end of SVU. Yeah.
It reminds me of, and again, we're not spoiling Oppenheimer, but there's a code that Oppenheimer gave his wife, like if the nuclear test went well. That's what this reminds me of. So in the morning when you a little bit bleary, you reach for your phone. There's just a little message.
There's
saying,
5 texts from you, which 100%. Is just like, check out this recap of Secret Invasion.
Yeah.
And then it's Phoebe being like, it turns out that woman had multiple stalkers.
And do you audibly like gasp, or do you have a reaction, or you just
no?
Say, like,
it usually takes me a second to piece together like what the actual first half of the plot was, and then I'm like, I wouldn't have picked that one. But yeah, it's going really well. We're running out of episodes.
That's impossible. There's 1,000 episodes.
There's only like, I just think that like so we have like kinds that we like. Mm-hmm. There's very specific, like I don't really care about SVU episodes that are all involve global politics, which you'd be surprised
really?
There are a fair amount that it's like a diplomat's son is kidnapped.
Oh, like the head of the IMF.
Yeah, right.
Not the Impossible Mission Force, the monetary.
Yes.
Part. Yeah.
So we have like a very specific brand that we check in on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you going to see Barbie this weekend?
Yeah, I might see it tonight.
Tonight?
Yeah.
Even though there's a new Blur album out?
Is that what you're going to do? Is go home
all
and
night,
quietly listen to Blur?
Not quietly. Just sit intently.
This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. New Year's resolutions are fun the first couple of weeks. Then you kind of maybe conveniently forget about them halfway through January. No shame. It happens to us all. But this year I have a foolproof plan, at least when it comes to saving money. Just switch to Mint Mobile and you're done. Goal accomplished, because for a limited time, their wireless plans are $15 a month when you buy a 3-month plan. The great thing about Mint Mobile is there's no jaw-dropping monthly bills or unexpected overages, and all plans come with unlimited talk and text. Get this new customer offer today at mintmobile.com/watch. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, now streaming only on Netflix.
TaxAct knows you don't look forward to taxes. TaxAct doesn't even look forward to taxes, and TaxAct is a tax software company. It's basically TaxAct's whole thing. If TaxAct did things over, maybe TaxAct would end up teaching kindergarten or leading fly fishing tours. But that's a different story for a different ad. So why don't we just agree that taxes aren't fun, but you still have to do them? TaxAct's filing software can help you do that. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Love the way you look this wedding season at Men's Warehouse. With the range of sizes from extra small to big and tall. Explore top styles at prices for any budget, including designer suit and tux rentals starting at just $159. With over 600 locations, in-store consultations, and easy online booking, there's a reason why couples choose Men's Warehouse to find their perfect fit. Men's Warehouse. Love the way you look.
Okay, let's talk. I want to talk about Justified.
Okay, so we've established your relationship to. So in the years since you dismissed Justified because it the crime of being on before you became a TV critic.
It's all about me. Yeah.
Have you gone back and kind of familiarized yourself with it?
No, but I did read all of the Raylan books.
Okay. So you're a strict originalist when it comes to Raylan Givens.
I am the Antonin Scalia of Justified. Yes.
Okay. So have you seen Justified?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I watched most of the first season and some of the second season, I may have dipped in at the very end because I think
to see the finale.
There was probably a week when I was like, this seemed like at the very end of I think it was still, it ended when Greenwald ended around then. But I feel like there was a moment when I was like,
I think so.
that would be a good use of my month.
Is to watch the final season of Justified?
All of Justified.
Okay.
But I didn't quite get to it. So so I'm ready to have a robust conversation, but I don't have the same points of reference that you do.
Prestige TV Hall of Fame episode. Me, Mal, and Joanna did one about the finale of season 2, which many people consider the best season.
That's
the best episode.
The Margot
of the best
Martindale.
And that's Margot Martindale's
amazing,
season.
yeah.
She's the villain of the second season. And it actually dovetails very nicely. I have lots of nice things. I'm deeply entertained by City Primeval.
Can we explain the premise here again?
Yeah. So basically, this is the origin story of this. I found out from one of the last celebrity interviews that happened before the SAG strike. I was watching Tim Oliphant on Rich Eisen's show. I was just doing a little Justified research.
Yeah.
And he said that one day on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was like, trying to think of like, what's the hook to bring Raylan back? And Tarantino's a huge Elmore Leonard fan.
And he was saying that because he's been playing marshals throughout the galaxy, desperate to get back to this part.
And he was like, Tim was like, there's this book, City Primeval, that we're thinking about making into, like, stripping it for parts and making it into a Raylan story. And apparently Tarantino's enthusiasm for that, he was like, man, at one point I wanted to direct that as a movie.
It's very Tarantino,
and was very thumbs up about it. And at one point was on board to maybe do a couple of episodes of City Primeval as a director.
Wow.
Which would have been pretty cool. But what we do get, so that's how it sort of started. It was this idea that there are other non-Raylan stories in the Elmore verse that they can insert Raylan into.
So I don't know if we can get too broad with this. I'm sure some people listening know and some people might not, but Elmore Leonard, one of, if not the greatest American writers of the 20th century.
Yep.
Sentence for Sentence, maybe my favorite. Just an absolute master of just...
Up there with Grisham, yeah.
Up there, I was going to say like him and Big Jim Salter. Very different subject matter, great sentences. But his career, which was very long and very prolific, he started writing short stories and westerns, and then...
Yeah, he's famously wrote 3:10 to Yuma.
And then began to get a bigger rep with his first run of crime books that were set in his hometown of Detroit.
Yes.
City Primeval among them, which was published in 1980. And there are a couple characters that bounce in and out. Some appear like as secondary characters, and others. There's a great 2-book run called Swag and Stick, which carry the same main character.
They're very important novels to me.
Very important novels to me as well. There's no such
Swag's
thing.
The kidnapping one, right?
I think so. I mixed them up because I read them back to back.
Right.
I adore them. One rule of thumb is there are no bad Elmore Leonard books. And
there really aren't.
It's really almost impossible to have a bad experience in reading one. And there's so many that I've been using them almost like booster rockets. Like if I fall into a fallow period of reading or I'm not enjoying the giant book I'm trying to get through.
Let's be honest, though, would you describe yourself as a Detroit guy or a Florida guy?
This is what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
I just want to say that if you pick up an Elmore Leonard book, it just kind of like gets the reading muscles going and you feel great pleasure, and then you can dip back into the bigger thing. So all this is, yes, I was going to set up to say...
You can jump back into American Prometheus, the Robert Oppenheimer story on page 2.
Yeah, exactly. Before you get to page 5, it's time for another Elmore break. The first books were in Detroit.
Uh-huh.
One of my favorite early books is called Split Images, where the characters from Detroit go to Florida.
To Florida, yeah.
And the way he writes about Florida, you could tell that he was feeling this.
Yeah.
Because then a lot of his more famous and celebrated books, including like Get Shorty, Out of Sight, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wasn't that Rum Punch, or was that Riding the Rap? Or
no, Out of Sight.
Was Out of Sight the name of the novel, or was it? It was Out of Sight.
Out of Sight is Out of Sight.
Right. Oh, Jackie Brown
is Rum
based,
Punch.
Based on Rum Punch.
Maximum Bob. Like these are all La Brava, one of my favorites. These are all in Florida.
Yeah.
And the Raylan
Cat Chaser, Little Florida.
Oh, Cat Chaser's so good. Little DR.
Little Latin America, yeah.
The Raylan character was introduced in a book called Riding the Rap.
Yeah.
And these Elmore Leonard books, they're just so tight, and like usually 4 characters
He's like the
get thrown
third
together.
or fourth character of Riding the Rap.
And clearly Elmore thought he had something, and Raylan comes back in Pronto, which is another great book.
Awesome book.
And then I think he had appeared previously in a short story, because that's why Justified's based on the Fire in the Hole short story that preceded those books. All of this is to say, Justified, great show. Fish out of water, Kentucky guy, right, in Florida. and this kind of completes the circle, brings a later period
It's an
Florida
ingenious
character
adaptation.
and drops him into the protagonist slot that it existed in City Primeval with a good character, a detective who never appeared in any other book. So it's almost a blank space.
Raymond Cruz appeared in other books, didn't he?
It's a great call. This is the
I
problem.
think Raymond Cruz is in a... Well, Raymond Cruz isn't the main character of Glitz, is he? That's a different guy, right?
See, the challenge here is that when there are 40 books,
right.
I can't speak authoritatively.
I could have sworn Raymond Cruz shows up. So for people who don't know, Raymond Cruz is a detective in Detroit in the novel of City Primeval. He is literally just Raylan in Detroit in this book. I mean, not literally, but he's going to be doing, if you read the book, it's basically the Raylan characters instead this character, Raymond Cruz. Obviously slightly different from Raylan Givens. He is referenced, Raymond Cruz is referenced and seen briefly in Justified City Primeval, but they've basically taken the High Noon in Detroit, which is the subtitle of City Primeval, and this idea of a lawman and a criminal on a collision course, and kept the Carolyn Wilder part, who now is played by, or not is now played by, but is played by Ingenue Ellis in the show, and tweaked a couple of other things. And then one of the main things I want to talk to you about is the updating of the Elmore Leonard universe, kind of, and the idea of taking something from 1980 in Detroit and making it in 2023. So they've added this new, instead of having a hardened veteran Detroit police officer navigating his own hometown and knowing all the back streets and dive bars and everything, it's this guy Raylan from Kentucky
via Florida,
who had just been on the setup to the show is that he's busy taking his daughter to a camp somewhere for some disciplinary problems and gets waylaid by two fugitives who try to take his car.
It happens.
And then so he brings them in on a warrant that they had in Michigan and thinks it's just going to be a quick stopover to drop these guys off. And instead he gets pulled into a kind of cat and mouse game with a character named Clement Mansell, aka the Oklahoma Wild Man, played by Boyd Holbrook, which brings me back to the great thing that Justified the show always did, which is pit this amazing martial character and this amazing heroic performance by Oliphant against a really formidable villain.
A charismatic villain.
And they did it again.
Yeah, they did.
They did it again with Boyd Holbrook.
Boyd Holbrook's performance on this show, you're having a lot of these moments, people have criticized you over the past for your investment strategy.
It's intuitive.
It's intuitive. It is, some would say counterintuitive. It is bearish at times. You take the long road. Next week, we're going to talk about the sudden spike in value of your Josh Hartnett stock. The Boyd Holbrook has been a shower, not a grower.
Yeah.
Until this summer.
Yeah.
He's so good in this. He's just great in this. I think, so 2 episodes in out of, not sure how many.
6, 8?
8.
8.
I love it. I love that it's back in our lives. I love this type of storytelling. And I also just continue to think it's just a no-brainer for any era of television because it kind of straddles a more old-fashioned procedural type framework with prestige touches, especially, with the literary imprimatur of Elmore Leonard and that vibe. I think it's fantastic. And this idea also that you could just do the British model in an American way, like they did with Luther or Prime Suspect. You have the Raylan character. So let's go.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it every year.
These books that you can probably insert him into in some way or another if you wanted to keep making these things.
Characters, even though the books can be quite different, they're all Elmore Leonard books. Elmore Leonard is the main character of Elmore Leonard books. And so all the characters could show up in each other's worlds. It's really not hard to believe that they might. Does this show, because I do have some criticisms too. I think this is great. To you, first thing, as a Justified superfan, does this feel like the show that you loved, and yes or no?
So TV does not feel that way anymore. I was talking about this with Joe and Mal, where I went back and watched the finale of 2, and that episode of television has to do so much work, and it has such a huge payoff at the end of it. but you start it and then you blink and you're 32 minutes into the episode. And it's not because it's like maniacally fast paced or like constantly cutting. It's just that TV used to have tempo and TV used to really, really be tight. And this is 2011, where you still have this transition happening from all these people who had worked on network shows and were writing to ad breaks and knew that you needed to have certain things happen at certain times of an episode. But they were starting to get more and more artistic freedom from the networks to explore season-long storylines and bring in more literary weight references and all these exciting things that were happening. And in my conversation with Mal and Joe, I kind of want to almost throw this back to you. They don't call that the golden age for nothing, because we thought maybe then that it was the golden age because we were finally free of sitcoms and procedurals or whatever. But what it turns out is it's also the golden age because people knew how to make an entertaining television show while also being stimulating and meaningful.
There was a foot in both worlds.
Yeah. And so I think that it's not a criticism as much as even this group of people working on Justified City Primeval who made Justified, who almost all of them worked on Justified. Michael Dinner, who directed the first few episodes of City Primeval, worked on countless Justified episodes. Dave Andron, who did Snowfall and worked on Snowfall with John Singleton, was one of the main writers of Justified and is now one of the main writers of City Primeval. Like almost all of the crew is there, but you can tell TV has changed again. Yep. And this one's a little slower. And this one is a little bit more contemplative. Does that make sense? I mean, like,
it has more space for those sorts of things, you mean?
Yeah. I think it's also, this show is very consciously commenting and thinking about the role of the like law gunslinger.
Yes, very much
in 2023 versus 2011.
Yeah, because I mean, Justified famously begins with a scene that was taken from Riding the Rap, I believe, the climax of the book, right? Which is that
it's basically Han Solo and Greedo. Yeah,
he shoots a guy.
Yeah,
like
in cold blood, more
basically
or less.
In cold blood, and we're like, wow, what a great hero.
Yeah,
and
that happens a lot in the first season. It's like Raylan's the guy who will kick down the convenience store door, ask the guy to surrender, and like if he's like, no, then that's it. You know what I mean? There's no negotiations and stuff like that. I think he evolves over the course of the show, but there's a real episodic nature to the kind of like first season is very much like crime of the week. Raylan's taken somebody to jail, or Raylan's got to go pick up somebody who skipped bail, or Raylan's got to do this. And it's very violent, I think as the show went on, it started to reckon with the violence more and more.
Yeah.
And then,
by the way, Pronto came before Riding the Rap. I've been saying this wrong the whole time.
That was really bothering me that you had said that.
I figured.
And I was almost going to ask Kai to erase this episode.
I think she should anyway, but for different reasons. Sorry, please continue.
Where was I? Oh, they're reckoning with this guy. They're reckoning with the idea of like lethal force on the part of like legal institutions and many people are very skeptical of the Justice Department.
I would say that is not the show's strong suit, quite frankly. I mean, I think that there are modern elements that they are gamely trying to put into this world that some work and some simply don't. There's such a, and so one of the things that I bumped on a little bit in the premiere was Elmore Leonard's Detroit is such a deeply specific place. It's one of my favorite places to visit in books. And it's not just that in that version of Elmore Leonard's Detroit, there aren't iPhones. It's that he is writing with a very, very keen eye from the ground level of a city that was riven by class and racial divides, as all cities continue to be. I don't mean to say that it's different, but his understanding of that city, like the back of his hand, was one of the things that brings you into the books. And this series, by contrast, is bringing Raylan into Detroit. So he's not that comfortable there. And so the way we get to learn about Detroit is Norbert Leo Butts' cop character like kicks in a door and is like, that's how we do that in Detroit. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I find myself wishing there was more baked in, lived in flavor honestly, that you do get sometimes. So, for example, the great actor, veteran actor Vondie Curtis Hall,
playing Sweetie,
plays a bartender, former musician, and more. Obviously, he's connected to the story. Named Sweetie. And when you're in his bar, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Vondie Curtis Hall is one of the few members of this cast who's from Detroit. That you're like, this is a place.
Yeah,
this guy knows the guy that he's playing, and he understands it. And I kind of wish there was more of that. I mean, in my experiences in visiting Detroit, which I think is a pretty great town, people talk a certain way, they act a certain way, and like it's you know you're there. And I kind of wish, even though they shot there, I kind of wish there was a little more than that.
They shot in Chicago.
Great call. They did not shoot there. I was hung up on the fact that there's the Joe Louis fist statue. They did the montage of actual Detroit, and then they go to Chicago. But all this is to say that, like, I kind of wish the cops talked like they were from Detroit. You know, I just kind of wish there was a little more of that specificity, as opposed to this character is now in a different urban environment.
Well, if it was Raymond Cruz, nobody would have to say this is how we do things in Detroit.
Exactly.
Because it's not like this guy's from out of town. There's a really interesting tension happening in the storytelling where you're taking a character from the 2010s, at least in our popular imagination, putting them in a show in 2023, but you're using a plot that was written in 1980.
That demanded certain things.
This is one thing many people may not know about you. Andy can be a little squeamish about TV or films, about violence or things in it.
It's true.
I think you've actually loosened up a little bit, but
thanks.
One thing you're not squeamish about is when you are reading.
Yeah,
you can take a lot.
It's totally
and
it's
Elmore
totally
Leonard books are grimy.
Yes,
especially the Detroit novels, and City Primeval especially is not for the faint of heart.
No, and it is also not for a modern sensibility.
Exactly, not.
I would say.
No, I would say not.
There's it plays out in the show where there is a city judge in the show played by Keith David, and
Judge Guy.
He behaves a certain way and has certain storyline. The book pretty much it just begins with him.
Yes,
cold, and this guy is a real character, and
he's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I
think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And there is not this not just modern, it's not just like a broadly modern sensibility. It's a broadly modern TV sensibility too, that he's a piece of shit, but on the show, he's like, I know things.
Yeah.
There's something else going on here. So, but when I hear that on the show, I feel like I'm being overly critical. What I'm hearing is people working really hard to find a different way in, which I think is the best spirit of adaptation.
And there is one element of this, or a specific element of this, that I think is absolutely singing, and that's Ingenue Ellis's performance as Carolyn Wilder.
She's amazing. She's great.
She's incredible. And in the book,
she holds the screen.
She's a little bit of a cipher in the book. Like Carolyn is actually like very much like compromised, and I'm sure that will come through in the show eventually. But she's very compromised by past relationships, and you understand a little bit more psychologically why she's representing Clement essentially. In this show, it's even more perverse and actually like sad that she's representing Clement, but it's because of, those same compromises that she has made over the course of her life and the situation that she finds herself in with her ex, so that you're kind of like, oh God, like she's trapped with this person that she is also now sworn to defend.
And I do think to combat my previous slight criticism, I think one of the things the show does best is suggest that those who work in the legal system and those who work as criminals in the criminal system are much more interconnected than one might imagine.
Yeah.
And that you can't really, it's like trying to cut out a tumor that's metastasized. Everyone is touched by everything.
Yeah.
And Raylan's sensibilities with his cowboy hat and his big gun might not play well there. He's a little bit, he's too broad for a place that's that specific. So I think that's all smartly set up. And again, like, this is a Western between two guys, and when they finally collide in episode 2, that's when it really ignited for me. And
it sure does.
I think we do have to talk about the one thing that is a little curious, at least to my eyes, which is in this series, Raylan has a teenage daughter, which is non-canonical from the previous series. Did she exist in the previous series? Or we just imagine
Nona is pregnant at the end of 2. I can't remember his daughter. I mean, he's got the kid is a part of it.
He has a kid.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Because also in the books, he has a wife and kids that we don't meet that are back in
Cruz or Raylan.
Raylan.
Oh yeah.
I
think Cruz has a daughter in
So
in City Primeval.
So it exists, and
Yeah.
also, who cares? It's a TV show, so now he has a daughter, and that's the sort of the engine that fuels the road trip, et cetera, et cetera. Raylan Givens' daughter, Willa Givens, is played by Timothy Oliphant's daughter, Vivian Oliphant,
Mhm.
which I imagine would be wonderful, and like his dream in working on set. I think it's a really wonderful story. I don't know if it's adding a lot, let's say. I think that she is
I don't think it's on the level of Caitlin Deaver in Justified season 2. I'll put it that way. And I think that's I mean, like, I really.
She's a very green performer.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to bump on that, I would say.
Some other things I like about this are I think they're doing a pretty good job taking a plot from 1980, integrating digital technology, the kinds of things that they wouldn't have had. When you're reading the book, it's you might as well be reading a Western. You know what I mean? It's like, well, maybe he'll pop up again, or maybe we'll do this, or we're going to stake this out. And it's like the level of digital surveillance that would probably be like, it would end a lot of 1980 crime novels.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on in the story about the extent to which you can do things legally, what you can charge people with, what you can do unless you're going to charge somebody with something, waiting for that person to lead you to a bigger thing, all these things that are kind of piling up. And then there's the more elemental story of now once like Clement has threatened Raylan's kid, as he does, that shit gets really real.
2 veterans involved in this that I think are worthy of note. The great crime writer Walter Mosley was on the writing staff for this.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I bumped on the music, and then I saw our guy Mark Isham, like 71-year-old dude who has done literally everything in the music business.
I also want to give the show the space to be like, we're going to be having guys talk about P-Funk.
That's true.
And not Lil Durk, and that's okay.
That's true. I guess this is a question to talk about when we get further into it, because there are aspects of this, and this is baked into the Justified franchise, there are aspects of this that strike me as aggressively old-fashioned, which is the nature also. The show is saying that. The show is saying that Raylan Givens, and the characters comment on it.
He's wearing a hat.
He's wearing a hat,
Stetson.
and as when Clement meets him for the first time, he's like, there are only 2 types of people who are your age and still doing this.
Yeah.
Right? Either they got passed over for the promotion, or they just really, really like doing this.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see
That's a
show.
great line.
It's a great line. It's brilliantly delivered, and it crackles. I think I'm just sort of processing, and I'm realizing I'm sounding much more negative than I mean to, because I'm digging this show a lot. But it is an interesting proposition to be like, we are proudly an old-fashioned thing, but we're also interrogating our old-fashionedness, and we're shooting it this a certain way, but also the music sounds like this. So it's kind of moving in 2 directions at the same time, and hasn't settled. And to my eyes, it didn't settle into what it's going to be until that last 15-minute run of the second episode.
Yeah. I think it's also a different story for the Justified world to be telling, to even in the second season, where it's this season-long arc about the Bennett clan versus the Crowder clan and the Givens family kind of caught in the middle. There are still several Case of the Week episodes in that.
Yeah.
And even though those episodes, I think, are a little bit more delicately tied to the larger story, they're still like, there's a pregnant prisoner who needs to be transferred from one prison to another, or Rachel, the other U.S. Marshal's brother, is in trouble and Raylan needs to stop Rachel from making a mistake, or there's like other little things.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing in season 2 with Winona's new husband who's in debt and orchestrates like a bank robbery. Like, there are these great subplots, and I don't know that we're going to get that from City Primeval, because the novel City Primeval is essentially 2 trains on the same track running at each other. Like, so I don't know that. I think part of the reason why, if I don't sound like, I'm so enjoying myself watching this, and I think it's really, really good, but I think I'm going to miss, like, what if Raylan had to go to Saginaw for the weekend to get somebody and bring them back? Like,
well, also it's part of that is also that Oliphant is such a classic TV leading man. Like, you just want to spend time with him and the characters that he creates. Wasn't there? I think we're also kind of chin scratchy, because I just feel like this represents a pretty interesting transition moment in television. Because wasn't there? Well, 2 things. One, because the conceit of the original Justified, I mean, there is a larger industry turn, back when there was a functioning industry, toward more old-fashioned storytelling. Like, if Justified had never existed and you signed up Timothy Oliphant to play a lawman and you got Taylor Sheridan to write it, it would be an open-ended series, right? Like, it would be what it was again.
Today?
Today. I feel like people might want that. A streaming service might want a multi-season show that had the rhythms might be different, but I do feel like that's still valuable.
I mean, you would know better than I would, but it doesn't sound like people are looking for multi-season shows anymore. Wouldn't it be Raylan versus Boyd?
No, actors aren't. But I think that networks are returning to the fact that like people just like their stories. I mean, I think that's one of the old-fashioned, though they may be. I think that's the Taylor Sheridan lesson that everyone's trying to chase. But wasn't there also, or am I misremembering, a different Justified reboot planned at some point? Wasn't there a script going around, or a different imagining it differently? I don't know whether it was Oliphant was involved.
Oh, I don't know. Actually, I feel like I have like a Justified Google alert, so I would know that. I don't remember, but what was just sort of like, but they were just going to move him to Florida or whatever.
You know what? I don't know if I'm not speaking out of turn. I just may be making this up, but I just feel like that
I would not be shocked. I mean, Oliphant's been like, we spend a lot of time on group chat trying to figure out like a way to work together again. So I'm sure that there's been stuff kicked
It's just
around.
sort of interesting if the show, especially if it continues to come back in different forms. Who knows what needle this will move, in terms of.
I think it's probably more likely. I mean, I was looking back at the ratings of Justified, and even though it was at once a sort of on the bubble show, it's like, oh, is Justified going to come back? Is Justified going to come back? It still did 3 million people per episode pretty routinely.
It's a very, very different time.
A very successful show right now.
Also, you know what the most telling thing is when you Google shows, just to remind you of like when did they come out? Because to my mind, Justified is still relatively, I think of it as kind of recent.
Yeah.
We think of it as whatever era we're in now in television. If you go to the Wikipedia page for like season 2 or 3, the image is the DVD set cover.
Yeah.
Which dates it more than anything we could possibly say. And you're right, like season 2, which was fantastic, the season 2 premiere had 3.5 million viewers on linear, not counting anything else. That is a different era.
Yes. So I can't remember how we got off on the ratings of it.
Oh, I just feel like it's an interesting test case for like what audiences want, and if it because you started the conversation by saying this is a show that really worked and made sense in its era, and now it's coming back slightly different. And
we started this conversation being like, cool, this is going to be like Sherlock. They should just do like 3 episode to 8 episode mini series every few years when he feels like putting the hat back on. I would imagine, I think he's like 55, like he's probably got one more of these in him, and he has said that like if this one works out, like we have another one we'd like to do.
That's cool.
But yeah, like there's also a part of me that would just like Justified to still be on.
That's the tension that I think I'm speaking to, which is I think people still want those types of shows. We are not ungrateful for this. And it's
but how hard would that be for you? If you miss one episode, you're like, well, I'm not going backwards.
I would love that because then I could just take it off my plate based on a completely obscure rule I made up 12 years ago. I don't see a problem with that.
Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I
think next week we're going to do some Hijack.
I think it's Hijack week on the watch.
Dude, it's the show of the summer.
It's so fun.
I think the 4th episode's really good.
So Hijack, people know we've been talking about this. Idris Elba show on Apple TV Plus. 6 episode total.
7.
7?
7-hour flight, 7 episodes.
I thought it was a 6-hour flight.
7-hour flight. Did you take a shortcut from Dubai to London?
I just fly. I fly real fast. I go on the go fast flights. You don't know about that? What is that? Remember the Chris Licht article?
I'm taking a blimp from Dubai to London, so it feels like 7 episodes.
You like pilots that waver from their flight path.
No, I mean, that's what the whole thing is hinging on, this like slight deviation.
Isn't this the Chris Licht quote that among many things got him fired, where he was just like, we can debate the nature of rain, but you can't tell me it's raining if it's not. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's 6 hours. Anyway, 5 episodes the 5th episode is going up. It went up last night.
Yes.
And the final episode is going out next week. So I think we could talk about
We can talk about it for when it's done if you'd like to. We could talk about it next Thursday.
So next Thursday is all Hijack, all plain nonsense.
Sure. You want to watch Special Ops: Lioness with me on Sunday night?
Can I watch it with you?
Oh man, that would be special.
And you fall asleep.
Kaya could come to the east side.
I text you at the end.
We could have some Thai food, just watch Special Ops.
No, Kai and I would both come to your house if you made one of your special leftover tacos.
Oh yeah.
Like the specialty of the house.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like crunch up some Pringles, sprinkle them on top.
I'm free Sunday. Whatever you got.
Okay, so for next week's homework, we're doing Special Ops Lioness with AMC spokeswoman Nicole Kidman.
And Zoe Saldana.
Excited
I've seen
about that.
I highly recommend it.
Sometimes I wish that your face could be communicated to our listeners. You're gleeful.
It's really cool. It's a good show.
You're gleeful about this.
Greenwald, great to see you. Thank you to Kaya for producing. Glad she decided to come back to her audio home of the watch.
Did you think that was in jeopardy?
Well, Portland's very seductive.
It is, but yet you always seem to come back.
That's true.
I feel like
you know,
this is Tinseltown.
Bill's got me on a lifetime contract. So thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back on Monday.
Is it like the Bobby Bonilla contract?